My parents gave my sister $560,000 to buy a house, but all they gave me was, "You're the failure." So I stopped calling them. 2 years later, my sister drove past my property and called Dad, screaming, "You need to see this." They still can't forget what I did next. Emotional hook, asterisk, asterisk, imagine spending your entire life being told you're a disappointment, that your passions are worthless, all while your family secretly lavishes your perfect sister with gifts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's exactly what happened to me, and it set off a chain of events that completely shattered my world, and then rebuilt it into something I never dreamed possible. Hey everyone, it's Blake, and if you've ever felt like you didn't fit into the mold someone else created for you, then this story is for you. Hit that like button if you can relate, and subscribe to join me on this incredible journey. Growing up, my life in Connecticut looked pretty perfect from the outside. My dad, Richard, was this powerhouse corporate lawyer, constantly racking up awards. My mom, Patricia, was a respected economics professor. We lived in this beautiful colonial, manicured lawns, 3-car garage, the whole 9 yards. But beneath that gleaming surface, there was a quiet battle always raging, mostly centered around me and my sister, Olivia. Olivia, 3 years younger, was the quintessential golden child. Straight A's, science fair wins, playing violin like a prodigy. My parents just beamed at her, throwing huge parties, plastering her certificates all over the living room.
Me?
I was the family wild card, as my dad so charmingly put it. My grades were, well, average. Mostly B's, a few A's when something actually caught my interest. Standardized tests. Forget about it. My mind was always wandering, dreaming of the photos I wanted to take, not the equations on the page. Art, especially photography, was my sanctuary. It was where I found the clarity that textbooks just couldn't give me. Our home ran on a currency of achievement. Love and approval weren't just given. They were earned. Dinner was Olivia's nightly stage, a spotlight on her latest triumph, while I'd just push food around my plate, dreading the inevitable questions about my test scores. I remember when Olivia won the state debate championship in 10th grade, our parents took the entire family to Disney World. My first photography exhibit at a local community center, junior year, my mom showed up for 30 minutes before a faculty meeting. My dad didn't even bother. It was a pattern. They were on the sidelines for every one of Olivia's soccer matches, cheering their hearts out. I'd stay late in the darkroom, carefully protecting my wet prints, and walk home alone. It wasn't that they were cruel, not really. They just invested their time and attention where they thought they'd get the biggest return. The defining moment came my senior year. I'd been accepted to a prestigious art school in New York, and also, of course, the law program at my dad's alma mater. To them, the choice was obvious. But when I announced I was choosing photography, the argument that erupted still echoes in my memory. We were at the fancy dining table, the one only used for serious discussions. The chandelier cast these harsh shadows on my dad's face as he slammed his hand down. "No daughter of mine is going to waste her life taking pictures," he roared, his voice cold. "That is not a real career, Blake. That's a hobby. You need to think about your future." My mom, ever the mediator, tried to soften it. "Darling, we just want what's best. Photography is so competitive." But I held my ground, my voice shaking but firm. "I'm not going to law school. I'm studying photography. That's my decision." The silence was deafening. Then my dad stood, straightened his tie, and delivered the ultimatum that changed everything. "If you choose this path, you choose it alone. We will not pay for an art degree. Our money is for real education, not fantasies." I can still see Olivia's face across the table. Shock, yes, but also something else. Pity? Relief that she wasn't the target? Maybe both. That night, I made the decision that would shape the next decade. I accepted the art school offer, knowing I'd have to work multiple jobs, take out loans, and forge my path alone. True to his word, my father cut off all financial support. My mom would occasionally slip me a few bucks during our infrequent coffee dates, but it barely made a dent. Meanwhile, Olivia flourished at her Ivy League university, her tuition, apartment, and expenses fully covered. For years later, I graduated. No one from my family was there. My section had empty chairs while my classmates were surrounded by proud parents. That day, I promised myself I'd build a life that made me proud, even if it never impressed them. With my degree and a portfolio I believed in, I rented a tiny studio in Brooklyn. No safety net, no family connections, just raw determination and a well-worn camera. My first years were a masterclass in persistence. My apartment was barely 500 square feet, the kitchenette so small I could touch both walls. The bathroom had a leaky faucet that sang a constant drip at 3 a.m. But it was mine, paid for with my own money, and that made it beautiful. I built my career from the ground up, taking any photography job I could find, wedding gigs for friends of friends, product shots for small businesses, headshots for aspiring actors as broke as I was. I bartended 5 mornings a week to pay rent, spent afternoons editing, and evenings building my portfolio. My routine was exhausting, but it had a purpose. I learned to live frugally, cooking simple meals, thrift shopping. Every spare dollar went to camera gear or student loans. I created a website, networked constantly, handing out business cards I'd printed at the local coffee shop. Holidays were the toughest. I'd take the train back to Connecticut, carrying modest gifts, only to feel like an outsider in my childhood home. Conversations always revolved around Olivia or my parents' social circle. When I shared news of an exhibition or a new client, the responses were polite but utterly disinterested. "That sounds nice, dear," my mom would say, before pivoting to Olivia's latest triumph. My dad was less subtle. One Thanksgiving, after I mentioned landing my first major commercial shoot, he looked up with a dismissive glance. "It's good you're finding work, Blake. But when are you going to get serious about your future? You're nearly 30. Olivia's on track to make partner, and she's engaged to that brilliant neurosurgeon. What do you have to show for yourself?" The comparison to Olivia was constant and, frankly, crushing. Her life was the blueprint: flourishing career at a prestigious law firm, engaged to a neurosurgeon from a well-connected family, luxury apartment, lavish vacations, a wedding being planned. Still, I persisted, holding on to hope that one day they'd see I was building something meaningful, even if it didn't fit their definition of success. Then came the call that changed everything. My grandmother, my mom's mother, passed away unexpectedly. My grandfather had died just 6 months earlier, and the double loss rocked our family. Despite our differences with my parents, I'd always been close to my grandparents. They were the only ones who truly cared about my photography, proudly displaying my work, introducing me as our talented artist. When I was struggling most with my parents' rejection, my grandmother would tell me, "True happiness comes from following your own path." And my grandfather would add with a wink, "Some people just need more time to see what's right in front of them." They lived modestly, comfortably, on 5 beautiful acres of woodland and open space, about 2 hours outside the city, with a cozy farmhouse they'd renovated themselves. It was my childhood sanctuary, a place where I could breathe freely and just be. The will reading was 2 weeks after the funeral. The family gathered at the lawyer's office, tense with unspoken expectations. I sat quietly, still processing my grief. Then the lawyer cleared his throat and began. "To our beloved granddaughter, Blake, we leave our 5-acre property and farmhouse, knowing she will appreciate its beauty and find peace there as we did." The room went silent. My father's face flushed crimson, my mother's lips pressed into a thin line. Olivia looked genuinely stunned. I just sat there, frozen, unable to comprehend what I'd just heard. The lawyer continued, explaining the rest of their modest savings would be divided among all the grandchildren. Afterward, my father cornered me in the hallway. "You need to sell that property," he said, his voice low but intense. "It's not practical for you. We can split the proceeds." Still in shock, all I could manage was, "I need time to think." "There's nothing to think about," he insisted. "You live in Brooklyn. You can't maintain a property that far away. Be reasonable for once." I left with the property deed, my head spinning with possibilities. I had no idea what I'd do. but something deep inside told me selling it would be a betrayal of my grandparents' trust. The first time I visited, keys in hand, I felt overwhelmed. The farmhouse needed work, peeling paint, a sagging porch, an overgrown garden. But despite its neglect, the place had an undeniable magic. Tall oaks, a small stream, birds singing, deer appearing at the forest edge. It was secluded, peaceful. My nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile away, an organic farmer named Warren, whom I vaguely remembered from childhood. I spent that first day just walking the property, rediscovering the treehouse my grandfather built, the fire pit, the gnarled apple orchard. With each step, memories flooded back, along with a growing certainty. This place was meant to be part of my future. My practical side knew my dad was partly right. Maintaining it from Brooklyn would be a challenge. The house needed repairs I couldn't afford. The land needed attention. Taxes would be due. Selling would be the sensible choice. But when had I ever taken the sensible choice? I returned to Brooklyn with soil under my fingernails and a head full of wild ideas. The next day, my father called. A family meeting. This weekend. His tone was a summons, not a request. When I arrived, the tension was palpable. My parents, Olivia, and Daniel sat like a united front. I took a seat, already feeling outnumbered. My father wasted no time. We've discussed the property. We all agree the best course of action is to sell. The market is hot. We could get a good price that would benefit everyone. By everyone, you mean you? I shot back, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Blake, be reasonable, my mother interjected. What will you do with 5 acres? You can barely keep your tiny apartment in order. Olivia leaned forward, a practiced mask of concern. We're just thinking practically. You're always struggling financially. This could give you a cushion. And what would my share be, exactly? I asked, already knowing the answer. My father cleared his throat. Well, given your grandparents already gave you the property, which is the bulk of their estate, it would be fair if the proceeds were divided among the rest of us. The injustice of it hit me like a physical blow. So, I get nothing? I sell my inheritance and hand the money over to all of you? You need to think about what's best for the family, my father said, his lawyer voice emerging. This is about being practical. No, I retorted, a lifetime of frustration bubbling up. This is about control. This is about you being unable to accept that I might have something valuable that you don't control. The argument escalated rapidly. Words were said that couldn't be taken back. And then, a moment I'll never forget. My father stood, pointed his finger, his face contorted with anger. You have been nothing but a disappointment since the day you chose that worthless career, he shouted. A complete and utter failure. We gave you every opportunity, and you threw it all away for what? Pictures? While your sister has made something of herself, built a real career, started a real life. The room fell silent. Even Olivia looked shocked. A real life, I repeated quietly. You mean the life you orchestrated for her? The one you bankrolled completely? Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Olivia wouldn't meet my eyes. What does that mean? My mother asked, her voice suddenly cautious. It means I know about the house, I said, looking directly at Olivia. The $560,000 house you got as a wedding present while I was working 3 jobs to make rent. The secret, carefully kept from me, tumbled out in the ensuing silence. My parents had bought Olivia and Daniel a luxury townhouse as a wedding gift, custom renovations, designer furnishings, all $560,000 of it. While I had been cut off completely for pursuing my passion. That was different, my father insisted. Olivia chose a sensible path. She earned our support. She earned your love. I corrected him. I never did. I stood up, suddenly feeling calmer than I had in years. I am not selling the property. Not now, not ever. It's the one thing in my life that came without conditions, without judgment. I'm keeping it. You're making a mistake, my father warned. No, I said, heading for the door. For the first time in a long time, I am absolutely certain I am not. I left without looking back, ignoring my mother's calls to discuss things rationally. In my car, I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for years. Then, I did something I'd never done before. I drove straight to the property, arriving as the sun set. I parked, walked to the porch, and sat on the steps. "Okay," I whispered to the darkening sky. "Let's do this." 2 years flew by, feeling like both an instant and an eternity. The day after that fateful family meeting, I made a decision that shocked even myself. I gave notice on my Brooklyn apartment, put most of my stuff in storage, and moved into the farmhouse with just the bare essentials and my camera. The first few months were brutal. The house needed everything. I slept in the only room without water damage, showered with a garden hose hooked to an outdoor spigot until I could fix the plumbing. I learned to patch roofs, replace rotten wood, and repair crumbling plaster through YouTube tutorials and sheer trial and error. My career transformed as dramatically as my living situation. Unable to continue my urban photography, I pivoted to what was literally in my backyard. I started documenting my journey, restoring the farmhouse, reconnecting with the land. I captured the seasons, the wildlife, the process of clearing overgrown paths. At first, I just posted on social media to stay connected, but people responded with surprising enthusiasm. My followers grew as I shared not just beautiful nature photos, but the raw reality of my new life. The collapsed ceiling, the raccoons I evicted, the first successful loaf of bread I baked in the ancient wood stove. 6 months in, a popular lifestyle blog featured my story. Overnight, my audience tripled. A sustainable living magazine commissioned a photo essay. A small but steady income from my online presence supplemented the freelance jobs I picked up in nearby towns. With careful budgeting and growing recognition, I began to transform the property according to my vision. I converted the barn into a studio. I planted a vegetable garden with heirloom seeds my grandmother had saved. I restored the apple orchard, learning to prune from a local farmer. That farmer was Warren, my nearest neighbor. He appeared one spring morning with a basket of fresh eggs and an offer to help fix my sagging porch. In his 50s, with weathered hands and kind eyes, Warren became an unexpected friend and mentor. He taught me practical skills my art school never covered: splitting firewood, identifying edible plants, engine repair, when to plant, when to harvest. In return, I helped him establish an online presence for his organic farm, photographing his produce, building a website that attracted new customers. Our friendship evolved naturally, two solitary people finding connection through shared work and mutual respect. My journey became a modest but lucrative business. I started hosting weekend photography retreats, teaching small groups how to capture nature's beauty. The farmhouse, partially renovated with Warren's help and skills I never knew I possessed, became a rustic guest house. I even built 2 tiny cabins deeper in the woods for additional accommodation, designed to blend with the environment. The irony was not lost on me. The career my parents dismissed as impractical was now fully supporting me. The property they insisted I couldn't maintain had become both my home and my livelihood. I had created something uniquely mine, on my own terms. My relationship with my family remained distant, but it no longer consumed me. Christmas cards, birthday messages, polite but brief responses to my mother's texts, declining invitations with work excuses. The constant ache of their disapproval had faded to a dull throb that only surfaced occasionally. I found peace in my new routine: mornings tending the land, days filled with creative work, evenings on the rebuilt porch, watching fireflies. I made friends in the community, people who knew me as Blake the photographer, not Blake the disappointment. One crisp fall afternoon, as I was photographing the vibrant foliage by my stream, I heard tires crunch on the driveway. Visitors weren't unusual, but when I rounded the corner, I stopped dead. A sleek black SUV I didn't recognize. And beside it, staring open-mouthed at my renovated farmhouse, was Olivia. She looked both the same and completely different. Designer clothes, perfect hair, familiar. But there was something new in her expression, something I couldn't quite place. When she spotted me, camera in hand, her eyes widened. "Blake? Is that really you?" I nodded, suddenly aware of my work boots, faded jeans, and flannel shirt. "What are you doing here, Olivia?" She gestured vaguely at the property. "I was driving to a client meeting, took the back road. I almost didn't recognize the place." She paused, genuinely flustered. "You live here now? You actually fixed it up?" "I do. And I did," I replied simply. She shook her head in disbelief. "I had no idea. No one did. Dad said you were probably just sitting on it until you got desperate enough to sell." The mention of our father brought back a flood of memories. "Why are you really here, Olivia?" I asked, my guard rising. She looked away, then back at me with an expression I hadn't seen from her before. Vulnerability. "Did you know this whole area is being developed? Luxury homes, less than a mile from here. A resort company bought out 3 farms already." I nodded slowly. Warren had mentioned rumors. "Blake, your land could be worth $2 million now. Maybe more." She wasn't asking a question. She was stating a fact. "Is that why you stopped by? To tell me about property values?" Her composure cracked slightly. "We talked about it. Okay. The whole family. Dad thought if I saw you, talked to you, you might listen to me about selling." The revelation stung, but less than it would have 2 years ago. "I see. And what commission would you get for convincing me?" Olivia flinched, as if I'd slapped her. Then, to my shock, her eyes filled with tears. "You know what? You're right. I came here with an agenda. But standing here, seeing what you've built..." She gestured at the property again. "I can see why you would never sell this." Her admission surprised me enough that I really looked at her. The designer outfit couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. The perfect manicure didn't disguise the tension in her hands. "Are you okay?" I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. She laughed, a brittle, humorless sound. "Am I okay? Let's see. My marriage is falling apart because Daniel works 100-hour weeks, and when he's home, we have nothing in common but debt. My job is killing me slowly. That house, that ridiculous house Mom and Dad bought us, has a leaking roof that will cost $30,000 to fix. But I can never admit any of this because I'm the successful one, right? The one who did everything right." I didn't know what to say. This wasn't the confident, perfect Olivia I'd grown up envying and resenting. "I should go," she said abruptly, wiping her eyes. "I have a meeting." She got back into her SUV, but before closing the door, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You know what the worst part is? You look happy, Blake." Actually happy. Then she was on her phone, her voice rising as she pulled away. "Dad, you will not believe what Blake has done with that property. We need to." The rest was lost as the SUV disappeared, leaving me standing in the yard, camera still in hand, wondering what storm was brewing. That unexpected visit left me unsettled for days. I found myself glancing toward the driveway, half expecting the whole family to arrive. But a week passed, then 2, and I started to relax, focusing again on my work. I'd just finished winterizing the beehives Warren had helped me establish when I heard another vehicle approaching. This time, I recognized Olivia's SUV, but she wasn't alone. Another car, a rental, had just arrived. Daniel stepped out, looking uncomfortable in casual clothes that still screamed expensive. They stood awkwardly in my driveway. Then another car pulled up, my parents' luxury sedan. My stomach tightened. My father's face wore his determined courtroom expression. My mother looked anxious beside him. "What is this, a family reunion?" I called out, trying to keep my voice light despite the anxiety churning inside me. "We need to talk, Blake," my father said, skipping any greeting. Just then, Warren's pickup truck rumbled up the drive, stopping behind the lineup of expensive vehicles. He nodded to me, a silent message of support. "I invited Warren to join us," I said, gesturing to my neighbor, "since any discussion about this land affects him, too." My father frowned but said nothing. "Shall we go inside?" I suggested, leading the unexpected gathering toward my home. The looks on my family's faces as they entered my renovated farmhouse were almost worth the tension. The sagging floors were now warm, golden wood. Crumbling plaster was replaced with sustainable materials in soft earth tones. The kitchen, once a dated mess, now featured reclaimed wood countertops and energy-efficient appliances, blending perfectly with the vintage charm. "You did all this yourself?" my mother asked, surprise evident in her voice as she ran her hand along a beautiful countertop Warren had crafted from a fallen oak. "With help," I acknowledged, nodding toward Warren. We settled in the living room. My parents, Olivia, and Daniel on the sofa. I'd reupholster myself. Warren and I in chairs opposite them. Through the large windows, the autumn forest created a stunning backdrop. "This is quite rustic," my father said, clearly struggling to find something negative. "Thank you," I replied simply. "Now, what is this about?" My father cleared his throat, falling into his lawyer persona. "As Olivia may have mentioned, this area is being rapidly developed. The Ridgeline Resort Group has purchased several surrounding properties and is planning a major luxury development. Golf courses, spas, high-end homes, the works." I nodded. "I'm aware. 3 of my neighbors have sold already. They are offering extraordinary prices," he continued, "well above market value. Your 5 acres are particularly valuable because of the stream and the elevation. They are very interested." "And how do you know that?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. Daniel spoke for the first time. "I have a patient who sits on their board. When he heard about our connection to property in the area, he asked if we might facilitate an introduction." "I see." I looked at each of them. "And you all came here today to convince me to sell?" "To discuss the possibility," my mother corrected gently. "This could be a wonderful opportunity for all of us." "All of us," I repeated. "So you're still expecting a share of my inheritance?" My father shifted uncomfortably. "Blake, be reasonable. This land has appreciated enormously through no effort of your own. It would be fair to distribute the windfall among the family." "No effort." I gestured around the renovated space. "I've put 2 years of sweat and every penny I had into this place. I built a business here. I built a life here." "Taking pictures is not a real business," my father dismissed. "Actually," Warren interjected, his quiet voice cutting through the tension, "Blake runs one of the most successful businesses in the county now. The photography retreats bring visitors from all over the country. They support the local economy, staying in town, eating at our restaurants, shopping in our stores." My father looked at Warren as if seeing him for the first time. "And you are Warren Milligan?" "Blake's neighbor and friend," Warren said, adding emphasis to the last word. Olivia, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Blake, no one is trying to take anything from you, but this could solve problems for everyone. You could buy a better property somewhere else, somewhere more convenient. We could all benefit." "What problems would it solve for you, Olivia?" I asked directly. She glanced at Daniel, then back at me. "That's not relevant." "I think it is. You said your marriage was struggling. You mentioned debt. Is this about money?" Daniel's face flushed. "That's private. Not if you're here asking me to sell my home to solve your problems," I countered. My mother looked shocked. "Olivia, what is Blake talking about?" The facade Olivia had maintained for so long finally cracked. "The house is underwater, Mom. The mortgage, the renovations, the lifestyle we thought we were supposed to have. Daniel's medical school debt, my student loans, were drowning. But your careers, your salaries." My father sputtered. "Go to keeping up appearances," Daniel said quietly. "The cars, the clothes, the vacations, the social obligations, the networking events you insist we attend. The country club membership you gifted us that comes with monthly fees we can barely afford." The revelation hung in the air like smoke. My seemingly perfect sister and her successful husband were living a life they couldn't sustain, trapped in a prison of expectations. "I had no idea," my mother whispered. "Of course you didn't," Olivia said bitterly. "We never talk about real things in this family, just achievements and appearances." I looked at my sister with new eyes, seeing not the golden child who had everything handed to her, but someone as trapped by our parents' expectations as I had been. The difference was I had escaped. She was still living in that cage. "I am not selling the land," I said finally, gently. Not to solve financial problems, not to make developers richer, not for any reason. This is my home. You are being selfish, my father accused, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. No, I replied.
For
the first time in my life, I am being true to myself. And I think that scares you more than anything. Warren cleared his throat. If I might make a suggestion, Blake's property isn't just valuable for development. It's valuable as it is. Her photography business is thriving. The organic garden supplies local restaurants. The tiny cabins bring tourism to our community without disrupting its character. What's your point? My father asked impatiently. My point, Warren said, is that Blake has created something worth preserving. Something that benefits more than just one family or one corporation. Something sustainable. I felt a rush of gratitude towards Warren. He had articulated something I felt but couldn't express.
He's right.
What I've built here matters, not just to me, but to this community. Olivia looked at me with an expression I'd never seen from her before, something like respect. I think I understand now. When I drove by and saw what you had created, I was jealous. Blake, you look so content, so sure of yourself. I've never felt that way. Not once. Her admissions stunned me. My perfect, golden sister, jealous of me? So that's it? You simply refuse to consider the needs of your family? My father pressed, but I could hear the defeat in his voice. I have considered them, I assured him. But I have also considered my own needs. The needs of this land. And the needs of this community. The answer is still no. As the tense conversation continued, Warren excused himself to check on something outside. When he returned, he had a basket filled with fresh eggs, late-season vegetables, and a jar of honey from my hives. Maybe you folks would like to take these back with you, he offered to my parents. Everything grown right here on Blake's property. Some of the best produce in the county. The simple gesture somehow broke the tension. My mother accepted the basket with genuine thanks. My father stood, straightening his jacket. We should go, he said stiffly. We have a long drive back. As they gathered to leave, Olivia hung back, letting Daniel walk ahead with our parents. When we were alone in the kitchen, she turned to me. I never understood why you walked away from everything they offered you, she said quietly. Now, I think maybe you were the smart one all along. It was never about smart, I replied. It was about authentic. About finding my own definition of success. She nodded slowly. I need to find mine. I think you can, I told her. You know, it's never too late to change direction. Even with all their expectations, all the investment they've made in me becoming who they wanted me to be. Especially then, I said. Take it from someone who disappointed them thoroughly. The world doesn't end. You just begin again. She hugged me then, an awkward but genuine embrace that felt like the first real connection we'd shared in decades. I'll call you, she promised. I watched from the porch as they all drove away, Warren standing silently beside me. When the last car disappeared, he turned to me with a small smile. Quite a family you have there. They are, I agreed. For better or worse. You stood your ground, he observed. Not many would have, with that much pressure. I looked out over my land, at the life I had built from nothing but determination and faith in myself. Some things are worth fighting for. Life settled back into its rhythm after that confrontation. Autumn deepened into winter, blanketing my 5 acres in snow. I hosted smaller, more intimate photography workshops, focusing on winter landscapes. The cozy farmhouse, with its wood stove and thick quilts, became a welcoming haven. Warren and I spent the cold months planning spring improvements, sketching designs for an expanded garden, more beehives, 2 more tiny cabins. Our friendship deepened into something more, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared values. As the snow melted, revealing the first green shoots, Olivia called. Our conversation was awkward at first, months of silence creating a barrier. But gradually, the tension eased. I left the firm, she said finally, the words tumbling out. You did what? I sat down on my porch steps, stunned. I quit my job. left the partnership track. Daniel and I are selling the house too. Olivia, that is huge. Are you okay? She laughed, a genuine sound I'd rarely heard. I think I am. For the first time in forever, I feel like I can breathe. Daniel's cutting back his hours, too. We're renting a small apartment while we figure things out. What did Mom and Dad say? I asked, imagining the fallout. Dad didn't speak to me for 2 weeks, she admitted. Mom cycles between concern and disappointment. But you know what? I'm sleeping through the night for the first time in years. We talked for over an hour, really talked, perhaps for the first time as adults, about expectations, appearances, finding happiness versus achieving success, about the courage it takes to disappoint the people who raised you. I've been thinking about what you said, Olivia told me before we hung up, about finding my own definition of success. I'm looking into environmental law, using my degree for conservation work instead of corporate profits. That sounds perfect for you, I said, meaning it. I'd like to come visit again sometime, she added hesitantly. Just me. To see your place properly, maybe learn a bit about what you do. I'd like that, I replied, surprised to discover how much I meant it. True to her word, Olivia visited a month later. She arrived in jeans and hiking boots, her hair in a ponytail, looking younger and more relaxed than I'd seen her in years. We spent the weekend exploring, talking about our childhoods and the different paths our lives had taken. She asked thoughtful questions about my business, genuinely interested in what I had built. On Sunday, as we sat on the porch drinking tea, she broached the subject we'd been avoiding. Mom and Dad want to visit, she said, watching my reaction carefully. They asked me to ask you if that would be okay. I set my mug down slowly. Why now? Olivia shrugged. I think seeing me make such a big change shocked them. Dad keeps talking about legacy and family connections. I think he's finally realizing he might lose both his daughters if he doesn't bend a little. And the property, the pressure to sell? I think that ship has sailed. The developers moved their focus to another area after you refused. Besides, I may have mentioned to Dad that what you've created here is worth more than any development check. The visit was scheduled for the following month. I spent weeks preparing, not to impress them, but to show them honestly what I had built. Warren helped me finish the new studio in the barn. I printed my best photographs and arranged them on a gallery wall. I harvested early vegetables from the garden, collected fresh eggs from the chickens I now raised. When the day arrived, I stood in the driveway, watching their car approach with a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Warren had offered to make himself scarce, but I asked him to stay. His steady presence beside me was a reminder of the life and community I had created, independent of my family's approval. My parents emerged from their car, looking slightly disoriented, as if they'd arrived at the wrong address. My father wore casual clothes that still looked stiff and formal. My mother carried a houseplant, clutching it like a shield. Blake, she said, kissing my cheek. The place looks different than I remember. It has changed a lot, I agreed. Come in, I'll show you around. The tour was awkward at first, my parents clearly struggling to reconcile the successful business and beautiful home with their perception of my failed career choice. My mother asked polite questions about the renovations. My father remained mostly silent, his expression unreadable as he took in the evidence of my thriving, independent life. The dynamic shifted when we reached the barn studio. The large, open space was filled with natural light from skylights I'd installed myself. My photographs covered the walls, a visual journey through seasons and landscapes. A long farmhouse table occupied the center, set up for workshops. These are all your work? My mother asked, moving closer to examine a series of sunrise images. They are, I confirmed. They are quite beautiful, she admitted, something like surprise in her voice. My father stood before a large framed photograph of the farmhouse in winter, snow blanketing the roof, smoke curling from the chimney, golden light spilling from the windows. It was my favorite image, capturing not just the structure, but the feeling of home it represented. This is remarkable, he said quietly, almost to himself. The quality of light, it tells a story. That's what I tried to do, I explained, caught off guard by his comment. Tell stories through images. Capture moments and feelings, not just scenes. He nodded, still studying the photograph. I think I understand now. We moved to the porch for lunch, the table set with food I had grown or made myself. Fresh salad from the garden, eggs from my chickens, bread I had baked that morning, honey from my hives, wine from a local vineyard where I'd photographed the harvest. As we ate, the conversation gradually became less strained. My mother asked about my business model, her academic mind engaging with the practical aspects of what I had built. My father, to my surprise, asked thoughtful questions about my photography techniques and creative process. Warren shared stories about the local community, the farmers market, the conservation efforts we were both involved in to protect the watershed. He spoke about my contributions to the area, the tourism my workshops brought, the articles that had put our small town on the map. You have created something substantial here, my father finally acknowledged, setting down his glass of wine. Something with real value, not just financially, but intrinsically. Coming from him, it was an extraordinary admission. I felt a weight I had carried for years begin to lighten. Why did you never come to my exhibits? I asked suddenly, the question emerging before I could stop it. Even in high school, when it would have been easy? My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. It was my mother who answered. We were afraid, she said simply. Afraid you were making a mistake we couldn't fix. Afraid you would struggle and suffer. Afraid we had failed as parents if you didn't follow the path we thought was safe. So instead of supporting my choice, you punished me for making it. I said, the old hurt surfacing despite my best efforts. We thought we were protecting you, my father said. We were wrong. The simple admission hung in the air between us. Not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement that carried its own weight. And Olivia? I asked. The house, the financial support? My father looked genuinely remorseful. We thought we were doing the right thing, setting her up for success. But look how that turned out. She was miserable in that perfect life we helped create. We made many mistakes, my mother added softly. With both of you, in different ways. As the afternoon light began to fade, my father stood and walked to the edge of the porch, looking out over the land. I wouldn't have chosen this for you, he said finally. This place, this life. I would have pushed you towards something I understood, something with a clear path. And I would have been wrong. He turned to face me. You found your own way, created your own success. I am proud of that, even if I don't entirely understand it. For my father, those words were the equivalent of a standing ovation. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Thank you, I said simply. As they prepared to leave, my mother hugged me tightly. We'd like to visit again, she said. If that would be all right. I'd like that, I replied, surprised to find I meant it. My father shook Warren's hand, then mine, holding on a moment longer than necessary. You have a beautiful home, he said. Thank you for sharing it with us. We stood in the driveway, Warren and I, watching their car disappear down the road as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. You okay? Warren asked quietly. I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't quite name. I think so. It's not fixed, not completely, but it's a start. He took my hand, his palm warm against mine. Beginnings are good, he said. I'm partial to them myself. 1 year later, I stood on the newly built observation deck overlooking my property, now transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The original farmhouse, restored to its former charm, sat at the center. The studio barn expanded, 3 tiny cabins nestled among the trees. The most significant addition was a small eco-retreat center we'd constructed near the stream, a beautiful, light-filled space built from reclaimed materials. I hosted extended photography residencies, environmental education programs, and wellness retreats. What had begun as a personal sanctuary had evolved into a thriving community space that honored the land while sharing its beauty. My parents had gradually become more involved in my life. My mother helped me develop an educational curriculum for school groups. My father, to everyone's surprise, had taken up photography as a hobby and occasionally joined my workshops. Olivia had undergone the most dramatic transformation. After leaving corporate law, she found work with an environmental nonprofit. She and Daniel had divorced amicably, both recognizing their relationship was built on external expectations. She now lived in a modest house 30 minutes from me and visited regularly. Warren had become not just my partner in business, but in life. Our relationship evolved naturally from friendship to love, built on shared values and mutual respect. He'd moved into the farmhouse, bringing his carpentry tools and quiet wisdom. Together, we continued to improve the property. The path to healing with my family hadn't been straightforward. There were still moments of tension, old patterns. My father occasionally made comments about real careers before catching himself. My mother sometimes compared Olivia and me. But these instances were rarer, replaced by genuine efforts to understand and accept us. The most profound change was with Olivia. Our competitive dynamic transformed into a supportive bond. We'd spent hours talking through our shared past, acknowledging how our parents' expectations had shaped us. The golden child and the disappointment, each carrying our own burdens, had finally found common ground as sisters and friends. The financial aspect of my life had evolved too. I steadfastly refused to sell to developers, but I'd found ways to make the property profitable. I even published a book of images documenting the seasonal changes of the land, which received critical acclaim. Most surprisingly, my father had established a family foundation focused on environmental education and land conservation, funded by the sale of their oversized house as they downsized to a condo closer to me. The foundation's first project? Purchasing the land adjacent to mine, protecting it from development, and expanding my natural buffer. Your grandparents would be proud, my mother had said when the foundation was announced. I thought of them often, imagining their joy at seeing how their modest inheritance had blossomed into something that benefited not just me, but an entire community. Their gift had come without conditions or expectations, a rare form of love. The afternoon sun cast golden light across the property as I prepared to welcome the workshop participants. From the deck, I could see the entirety of what we had built. The vegetable gardens, the apple orchard, the beehives, the wildflower meadow. But the physical transformations paled in comparison to the inner journey. I had learned to define success on my own terms, to build a life aligned with my values. I discovered that standing firm in your truth, even when it disappoints others, isn't selfish, but necessary for authentic living. And most importantly, I had found that families, like photographs, can be recomposed to create something new and beautiful from what already exists. Ready for the group? Warren asked, joining me on the deck. 20 photographers would be arriving that afternoon. Almost, I replied, leaning into his solid presence. Just taking a moment to appreciate how far we've come. He nodded, understanding as always. From a rundown farmhouse to this pretty incredible. Not just the property, I clarified. Everything. My family, my work, finding you. Warren smiled. Finding ourselves, I think, separately and together. My parents and Olivia would be joining us for dinner that evening, a monthly tradition. These gatherings weren't always perfect, but they were authentic in a way our family interactions had never been. That evening, after the workshop participants had settled and my family had returned home, Warren and I sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance across the yard, the same porch where years earlier I had sat alone, wondering what would become of this inherited land and my uncharted future. You know what I think the real inheritance was? I said softly. Not the land itself, but the belief that I deserved a life that made me happy, that I was allowed to choose my own path. Warren nodded, his arm warm around my shoulders. The best legacies aren't things but permissions. Permission to be yourself. Permission to build something meaningful. As darkness settled, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from disappointed daughter to confident creator, from isolated artist to community builder, from a person seeking approval to one offering inspiration. The road hadn't been easy or straight, but every difficult turn had led me exactly where I needed to be. What are you thinking about? Warren asked. That true success isn't measured in property or possessions. I replied, finding the words for the lesson I'd lived. It's measured in authenticity, in the courage to build a life true to yourself, even when others don't understand. In creating space where others feel free to do the same. In the distance, an owl called softly, a familiar evening sound that never failed to remind me how fortunate I was to call this place home. Not just the physical location, but the life I had created here, the community I had built, the peace I had found. I wouldn't change any of it, I whispered. Not even the hardest parts. Because in the end, what had seemed like rejection had become the doorway to acceptance. What had felt like failure had transformed into the most meaningful success. And what had been given as consolation had become my greatest blessing. Outro, call to action. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own authentic path? I would absolutely love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember, your unique journey has value, even when others might not see it yet. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that choosing their own path is not just okay, but sometimes the most courageous thing they can do. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and may you find the courage to build a life that feels true to you, regardless of what anyone else believes you should be doing.